So today, Anthony, we're going to fantasize that people still care about our generation, although I suspect it's all about Gen Z these days. What do you think?
It's all about you, Glenn. It's all about
baby.
you.
The way it should be.
I'm Anthony. Welcome to No Vacancy Live. That's my friend Glenn.
You're watching the #1 show in hospitality.
Everybody, welcome to No Vacancy Live. That's Anthony Melchiori. I'm Glenn Hausman. You turned into the industry's #1 podcast. Thanks so much for all your support out there. They've been helping make us #1. So far, we've got so many downloads going on this month. We're really catching fire again. It's awesome. Very excited, Anthony. Very excited over here. But I'll tell you what, you did say that it's all about me. But the fact of the matter is I come after my 2 kids, my wife, my mom, the 4 cats, and a pile of laundry. So I'm not doing so well around here.
And the mailman.
Yeah, well, you know, he's a hero in our house over there. He's delivering all those checks and stuff like that. So that's exciting. So how are you today?
I'm good until I just got this really bad cramp in my leg.
Well, I'll tell you what, the good thing about getting on almost 750 episodes of doing No Vacancy Live is that we don't have to be so serious anymore because people know what we're all about.
Since we were just talking about what generation we are. I just got a cramp in my leg, so you know what generation I'm in.
Yeah. All right. So I'm firmly a Gen X person. My mom and dad were, of course, my mom was a real baby boomer. So I guess, I don't know, she was on the border because she was born during World War II. My cousins are baby boomers. I'm Gen X. Millennials, I got a lot of those as friends, but my kids are Generation Z. And I don't think people realize that college age group is a totally different generation. What everyone seems to be lumping in with that millennials group, right, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. And matter of fact, Dr. Producer Suzanne, maybe we can pull up a chart breaking down all the ages of all the generations.
Yeah, let's go back to the silent generation, which was kind of like the olden day Gen X, that generation that did all the hard work in World War I and then got forgotten, you know?
Yeah, well, listen, every generation gets forgotten until who Tom Brokaw wrote the book, The Greatest Generation. It's like nobody even knew that they did anything. You know, like if you look at the last 20 years and how many people went to war for us, and then when you ask somebody today, when was the last time they have a war? They're like, oh, we haven't had a war in years. But we've had men and women go into the battlefield and had more deployments than ever in the history of our country in the last 20 years. And nobody even thinks of them. So think about that generation, those people who are completely forgotten. Like Vietnam, they came back and everybody didn't like them, but at least you know what Vietnam was. Yep. These people, nobody even know what they fought for and who they are.
Right. All right. Silent generation, 1925 to 1945. Greatest generation, 1910 to 1924. Baby boomers, 46 to 64. Baby bust, the Generation X is 65 to 79. So that's us over here. Then they have the generation, the Xennials, 75 to 85. I don't know about that. Millennials, 80 to 94. And then, of course, Gen Z, which is what we're going to be talking about, 1995 to 2012, all those college kids. And, of course, younger folks than that are now being called Generation Alpha. Got to get a better name than that. You can't just go from Z to A, people. We got to get more creative.
Yeah, and you know what? They're not Alpha.
No, they aren't. They think they are. Well, I don't know. I don't know any kids that young, but I'll tell you one generation that does think they're Alpha. It's Generation Z. And to really get a better understanding of who they are, we have on an expert that has been focusing on Generation Z. In fact, this past summer, she did 7 weeks on an ethnographic study using a social anthropological approach on the traveling behaviors of Gen Z and digital nomads. So you're going to get some younger millennials in that digital nomad category, some older folks, but firmly in that Zen category.
Glenn, can you do me a favor before you bring her on?
Yeah.
What the hell did you just say?
All right, let's bring her on. Lisa, let's break it down. Let's start with the word ethnographic and then go into anthropological and kind of explain that to Anthony right there.
Sure. So first of all, thank you both for having me on. And
well,
thank you for calling me an expert.
Actually, before you start,
yeah.
You know, one of somebody we know, I guess that was your professor at some point.
Yes.
referenced you, and that's how we found you, right?
Yeah, and it's fine to say Dr. Robert Rippey over at UNLV. He does great stuff over there, running the Innovation Blackfire Studio over there. And Anthony and I have been over there a couple of times. I got to interview Dr. Robert Rippey before, and we hold him in high regard, and he holds you in high regard.
And
So
Lisa,
welcome.
did you know that he was a fighter pilot?
I did not know that, actually.
He was a United States Air Force fighter pilot.
That's cool. You know, I also hold him to high respect, so that, you know, increases that.
You know, it's interesting. Like, if I was a United States Air Force fighter pilot, I guarantee you would know it. But he is so humble, like, you don't even know that. Like, there's no way you're getting out of my, like, class without knowing I'm a fighter pilot. Anyway, sorry, Lisa.
No, that's okay.
So Lisa, this Gen Z thing, you know, I said in my introduction that I think that people are confusing millennials with Generation Z. Maybe the place to start is, who are they and why should the travel industry care about them?
Okay, so I would classify Gen Z as anyone born 1997, past that, you know, before the Gen Alpha generation, or I like to call them Gen Tech, as they've never, you know.
Better name.
I think it's a better name. I'm not sure if I made that up or it sounds kind of cool.
I'd take credit if I were you. And if Anthony's going to take credit for being a fighter pilot, you can do that too.
Sure, I'll coin that term right here, the Lisa Waitley term for anyone born younger than that. But they actually, what's really interesting is now they make up over 30% of the consumer market. They're the biggest generation that we have currently. And so I think that anything that they are interested in, any trends, are definitely something that every industry needs to be very aware of, as they're, you know, most of them have already graduated college or post high school age. So they're really entering the market full force. And so I think we really need to pay attention to what they're purchasing and what they're paying attention to.
Yep. Anthony, you want to take it from here, or you want me to continue?
No, continue, please.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated.
I know it really. I love this generational studies, and one of the things that I've been doing in my quest in this career, in educating, empowering, and hopefully entertaining people, is to give people the understanding that yes, sure, we're kind of all the same, but different generations do have different ways of behaving. Sometimes it's geared towards their age, sometimes it's geared towards cultural differences, and sometimes it has to do with the level of technology that's available here. So, Generation Z is in an interesting place because they are the first full-fledged generation of digital nomads versus digital immigrants. And digital immigrants are people like us and Gen X who didn't have the internet when they were younger and migrated to a lot of these new technologies, where digital nomads, as you obviously you know, Lisa, are people that grew up with an iPad, for example, in their hands. How is that affecting the way Gen Z looks at the world? And then we can talk about the characteristics that it forms within them.
So because, like you said, they grew up with an iPad in their hands, they always have constant access to all the information in the world. All they have to do is type it into Google, send it on, and they will receive anything and everything they need to know. And I think that has really caused, you know, some good information, a good understanding of what's happening, as well as maybe an overwhelming amount of information that may cause some upset, I guess. I would say a lot of the travelers I have met, and studies have shown this in my existing literature, that sometimes this overwhelming amount of information can cause a little bit of distress. So,
well, that's true. There's a very famous book that came out in the late 80s, early 90s called The Paradox of Choice. And what was really interesting about that book is that it posits that while we think that having all of these choices and information at our fingertips is helpful, it absolutely paralyzes us in a way for making strong decisions. And that I could see as a big issue that could be affecting Generation Z, which from a book that was written before this generation even existed.
And to that point, if you remember, travel agents went really double-digit decrease year after year after year once the internet came on. And now travel agents are back in style because people are overwhelmed by all the information.
Yep.
Yeah, so actually, I think there have been also studies about, if you have too many choices, then it actually makes it obviously harder to make a decision. So restaurants like the Cheesecake Factory or other places who have huge, massive menus, people are less satisfied with their choice because they have so many options.
We just need 6 good things that cover different proteins and vegetables.
And Glenn knows when he eats with me, what do? Tell the chef to order for me.
Yeah.
I tell the chef to order for me. Because I don't want to make a choice. I want to be entertained. Just make a choice. So, what is important to that generation? What's important that, every generation discounts the other generation for many reasons. But what are the things that are important to them? And also, what is a fallacy of people of my generation that think is true, but is not?
I would say that's something really important is being eco-friendly and sustainable, especially when it does come to travel. The younger millennials and Gen Z are really focusing on traveling sustainably, not leaving too much of a footprint, whether it's socially, culturally, or eco-friendly and nature-wise.
Lisa, would it be fair to take sustainability and just up that to ethical companies that people want to deal with, and where that's just part of it?
Yeah, I would say that too. Myself included, and many people I know younger than me are really trying to focus on consuming, ethically. Certain companies that might, stand for something that might not fit morally to many younger people. They're less likely to purchase.
I'm sorry, Lisa, but there are 2 types of people, right? Or maybe 3 types of people. People that don't care, people that care, and people that think they care, right? So we're all using technology that use cobalt. Well, the cobalt mines are basically child labor, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And tell the generation that is so dependent on computers and iPhones, well, in order to make sure it's sustainable and make sure that we're being good people and we're being honorable and we're being moral, put your phones down, put your computers down, everybody go back to Morse code. It ain't going to happen. So there's very few people that are really, if they're discomforted from the environment, they're going to try to they don't want to take the easy way out, but they're not going to be overly uncomfortable. You tell a 15-year-old to give me your phone because we don't want child labor to put minerals into your phone, which every phone uses cobalt. You'll see how sustainability is important to them.
As long as you don't say that in a pair of Nikes, you'll be okay.
What's that? In a pair of
As long as
Nikes?
you don't say that in a pair of Nikes.
I was just
they had that issue like 20 years ago, but they fixed it.
Yeah, I'm in my marketing. I'm in my marketing company that I use, and they just gifted me a box with this product that they're part owners with and also packaged. And as soon as they handed it to me, they say the entire thing's sustainable. This is sustainable, that's sustainable. And it was really important to them to create that, because when they did give it to me, the first thing I thought, I was like, wow, this is a lot. But they already told me that it's 100% sustainable, and that helped me. And even the material felt a little bit different. So, I just think that you're right, but then some people don't want to be, put out. I know somebody that lives the sustainability lifestyle, and literally if you told him to put his phone down, he would.
Wow. You friends with Ed Begley Jr.?
No, because he was he used the flip phone. He went to the Oscars by mass transportation.
Nope. That's pretty cool.
So yeah, he went to the Oscars with his daughters, with the train and the bus, and they documented it.
Yeah. Sorry to get you confused with old people stuff there, Lisa. He was on the show called Saying Elsewhere and then became an environmentalist. Meanwhile, back to you, Lisa, and what Generation Z is really thinking about. So obviously they want to deal with companies that are sustainable, ethical, focused companies, but what is it that they're really looking for in travel? What are their travel habits, that you see? Millennials, I find, was the first generation to really embrace that experience economy. And I feel, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, that Generation Z has really doubled down on that. And for them, the experience is the way to live, and other aspects of it, work is important, but not like the other way. It used to be for us in Gen X, we were programmed to work, 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 and maybe have a life. So how do you see
and let's just, for people joining us, what age are we talking about again?
Yeah, so I would say currently 26 and younger.
Okay.
Currently would be the Gen Z age that would be classified as. So I would agree, millennials, care about experience, and Gen Z for sure doubled down on that. Millennials loved taking longer trips, maybe taking a gap year, taking a few months to just travel, whereas Gen Z is preferring, for the most part, shorter trips, but more of them and more meaningful. And where they're traveling to is also evolving due to sustainability, or, wanting to be more off the beaten path, less touristy, kind of discover these new places, new hidden gems that have never really been explored before, and embrace the culture of the place, embrace, more how are the locals living rather than what are the main tourist attractions that people are flocking to.
That's interesting, because I would say Generation X, we were the first ones to start thinking about that. But our approach to it was, we're going to stay at that luxury resort or whatever resort, and then maybe we could go to town and have, and eat in a restaurant with a local. What you're really talking about right now is immersing yourself in that culture and being one with that community in order to have a truer, more authentic experience. Yes.
Yes. And I would say something that is important to distinguish about the research I did this summer with Dr. Rippey for my master's thesis. I only studied those staying at hostels. And I do feel like the people who do travel through hostels, especially solo travelers, travel much differently than those who prefer to stay at hotels, regardless of age or
and probably
generation.
think differently, and probably their moral compass, their thought process is so much different. Because I think people that are doing that are a little bit closer to the environment, closer to the earth, less about comfort and more about leaving a smaller footprint. But I will tell you something that I learned last night by posting something. And Glenn, I don't like talking about politics or negative comments, so I post very interesting, entertaining things, but not controversial. So I introduced a video that I actually shot a while ago that my team posted about tipping. Oh my God, they don't like to tip, and they are not shy about telling me that I'm old and that tipping is outdated, and then people that are doormen and bellmen shouldn't have those jobs because they're unnecessary. I had to delete some comments because they were getting really rude. And if you go and look at those comments, Glenn, it was ridiculous.
I'm going to. Wow.
Like I learned a lot just by that video, that they don't want to tip, period.
Well, tipping in a lot of ways is anachronistic and mostly an American phenomenon. You go around the world, they don't have that culture at all. And I think, Lisa, you'll correct me, but I think what some of the problem is and why they're so against it is because tipping has moved beyond preferential service and making people feel good and housekeeping, doormen, bellmen, servers in restaurants, to someone's handing me a bagel that was pre-buttered in another country and they want a tip on it, So I think that nickel and diming kind of feeling is what's really at it there. But I also suspect that they want people to get paid a living wage. Lisa, am I right, or am I an old man? Or maybe both.
For sure, I would say that a big argument with younger people is that people need to be paid a living wage. It is frustrating, knowing servers. I've been a server before, that they can make less than minimum wage just because they
it's crazy.
Need to rely on tips. I would say, as personally as a server and with many other fellow young Americans, is they tend to actually tip better than those in previous older generations. We grew up knowing, 20%, 18 to 20% is good tipping, where I remember as a kid, my parents, took that 12 to 15%. And yes, inflation happened and yada, 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 where people need more money to survive now, a little bit higher, money. And so therefore tipping has increased. The need for tipping has increased now that everywhere has, you could pay on the little iPads where it automatically at restaurants, coffee shops will suggest the tip amount. Usually it's 15, 18, 20, 22, but I've been seeing a lot here in Las Vegas of they start the minimum of 20%.
Yeah.
So, you just tap 20%. And personally, I don't know if I just surrounded myself by a very, nice social friend group, but I personally know that everyone will tip 20%, people my age and younger, unless it's poor service to where they will go down to 18 or 15%, but still the tip, even if, there were rats in their food or something, they're still like, oh, I'm sure there was a misunderstanding, so I'm still going to tip 15 to 18%, even if the service was bad.
And you're Glenn, you were right. The comments you made about they need a living wage, all throughout the comments, like it's not my job to pay them; it's the employer's job to pay them, and I agree. But there is this with the generate, even not only Gen Z, but that you have it tougher because it's $7 for a Starbucks. I understand that, but I was making $2.35 an hour when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And I was making $22,000 an hour or $22,000 a year when I was 25 years old. So, and things were, gas was what it was, 18% for a mortgage. So, houses are expensive, but interest rates are lower. Whereas I could buy a house when I was 25 for $250,000, but it's 18%. It's an 18%. So it's quadruple what people would be paying today for your mortgage payment. So, I don't know if any generation's had it worse than the other generation.
Well, I think that if you look at the numbers, and Lisa, I bet you could back me up with this. When it comes to what you're talking about, housing specifically and purchasing housing, it is much, much harder with adjusted inflation basis and all that you're talking about for someone to afford a house today in 2023 than in 1973, for example. It's not even close. And I think part of the reason why there's some generational discord with the younger people thinking about older people is because that's an issue. College is ridiculous. My dad went to college for free that the city paid for. It was not a big deal. That's what everyone did in New York City back then. And now it's 80 grand a year for each of my kids. Right?
Yeah, but if your kids go to a SUNY school, that's not the case.
But it's still going to cost a whole lot more money than it did for my generation.
Listen, it's more expensive to live. I get that, but the person that bought a house for $68,000 in 73, and I know somebody was making $10,000 a year. So if you're making $50,000 6 times is where the house. So you're listen. We can debate this, and it's nobody's right or wrong. I just think.
Well, the numbers actually, Anthony. I'm sorry if you think I'm being rude, but the numbers show that what you're saying is not correct. It's much on a dollar for dollar basis, and all of those things get factored in for housing and college and for absolutely everything.
Listen, I'm living it. Trust me. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I guess what my point is we have to respect each other from generations.
Yes.
They discount us, we discount them, and yes, it's more expensive, but there were some things that were worse when we were younger. It's just, I get really upset when people talk bad about the younger generation, and I get upset when the younger generation is completely maligned their grandparents.
Listen, if the younger generation didn't suck so much, it wouldn't be a problem. Just kidding. Lisa, I want to take it back to the tipping thing as a bridge to somewhere else. I think what we're really talking about with the tipping is because it's part of that overall experience, right? So they don't mind paying for it because they think it's part of what it is. But I don't think that your generation and this Generation Z even cares necessarily about buying those houses. I think they're starting to see through that is a false bill of goods that was dressed up as the American dream, where the Generation Z people would rather rent. They would rather be digital nomads. They would rather go out and do these tangible things on a day-to-day basis that you're talking about, like enmesh themselves in other cultures or be a part of something meaningful. Is that a fair assumption? And how is that reflecting the way that people are actually traveling with that generation today?
Yes, I would agree. So I'm 28 and I don't really know many people who can even close to afford a house.
Right.
Like they will not for years. Definitely cannot afford kids. I have a dog and that's already, pushing pushing my budget.
Yeah.
Dogs are expensive. And so I can't even imagine owning a house, having kids. Those ages of people owning a house, having kids, getting married are just increasing, especially in urban areas where rent is exponentially going up. Price of housing, food, everything is exponentially increasing compared to wages and salaries, which have barely seen any amount of increase compared to cost of living.
Right. I
So
mean, the federal minimum wage hasn't changed in something. I'm just making this up since like 2009 or something like that. It's still $7.25 an hour. Now, local jurisdictions have upped it, but on a federal level, it hasn't changed. So yeah, that causes a lot of undue pressure. Please continue, Lisa.
Yes. So people are renting more and also spending more on experiences, spending more on travel, because that's something that you can do now. Whereas, people are kind of wanting that, not necessarily the housing market to crash,
Right.
but, people are waiting for the prices to go down a little bit, waiting till they save a little bit more money. So what can you do now in the meantime is, spend certain amount of money on something that can benefit you right now. And that
Right.
instant gratification is something that is really enforced and, loved by the younger generation.
And it's a no-win situation because even when the prices of houses come down, like Austin, prices went up and now they're coming down a little bit, but the interest rates are higher. So you're paying actually more in the market.
Right.
So you're right. It's a no-win situation. And the more people I talk to your age are feeling exactly the way you're feeling.
So according to CNBC, if you want to buy a house, and this is going back a couple of years, it's $199,200 for the median price of a home. This is 2017. However, if you were to buy a house, the median home price in 1940 was $2,938. In 1980, it was $47,200, but adjusted for $2,000, that's only $30,600 for that house in 1940, compared to $199,000 in $2,000. So that's a pretty significant difference and a significant hump to overcome. So I'm not surprised that younger people are thinking differently about the way they want to live. Also, Gail is saying this generation prefers not to marry, and I see that maybe being true. We'll see. They're still young. And I think the average age of an American getting married is going up and up and up. But again, I want to go back to their travel patterns. You were talking about smaller little trips here and there. What can hoteliers start to think about in order to start to win this particular audience who's at the beginning of their traveling career? All these brands out there like deodorant and toothpaste try to win over people when they're 15, 16, 18, 20 years old. What do you think the hotel brands and different hospitality companies should be doing with this generation?
I would say the number one thing is offering experiences. Instead of, you go to a hotel, you find things to do through a concierge. The hotels offering, more local experiences rather than here, go on this, touristy cruise ship or go here to this, planned tour of the Eiffel Tower or Vatican City. They want the more local experiences of how they can travel and embrace the local culture while learning from a local themselves and not a tour guide. So I would say the number one thing that the people I know, the people I worked with this summer want to have those authentic experiences and not just kind of the copy and paste that everyone can.
So
Yeah,
because Anthony misses out on me using big words, so you're saying it's a generation of autodidacts, right? People that like to learn on their own, just in case. Sorry. Just Anthony, continue.
I only appreciate you talking down to me, Glenn. When I went to Sicily, we did for a show. We did cooking classes, and I know everybody goes to Italy does cooking classes, but I really was like, wow, it really made me feel special because I'm in someone's home. Actually,
Yeah. How amazing!
Castle. So you're 100% right, and I just unfortunately, based on where hospitality is right now, I just don't know how much, especially since most of the hotels are brands, how much are they going to pull it off? Because I think they try, but I think they're not very good at it.
Lisa, I would argue that I don't think most people that are leading the hotel companies have a clear understanding of what the word experience means for the younger generation. It's such a vague word to begin with, and it's become such a catch-all phrase for almost absolutely everything that I think we need to redefine and create a new vocabulary around some of these things. Yes, Marissa, thank you. Very, very
the only experience
much.
they're interested in is their stock price.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems it. That's why I think it's so important for us to talk about what these experiences are. So I think a lot of hoteliers out there think an experience is just a clean, comfortable room, maybe having a bar, a little outdoor space. But in the traditional hotel market, what is it really that these younger people are looking for? Because they can't immerse themselves in a very local culture necessarily within the hotel. So how do hoteliers appeal to these folks at all?
So I would say that my knowledge is a little bit outside of the hotel spectrum, especially since I personally only stay at hostels, and my work this summer was.
Well, you could use your real life to answer because we're literally twice your age over here. So you are much closer to what we're talking about than we could ever imagine.
Sure. So I personally would not stay at a hotel if I'm traveling by myself. If I'm traveling with friends,
because of the social component? Because the hostel makes it okay.
Yes. And I would say anyone that I worked with between the ages of 18 and 33 who was traveling solo, they said the same thing. They would pay more for a hostel than for a hotel because of the social experiences it gets them. More people are, solo traveling now, especially those who are working as digital nomads. They're working remote, traveling around, and their lifestyle is much different than those working in an office, where around 68% of Generation Z will probably never work in an office.
Wow. Say that number again.
68%.
Ooh, that needed to be underscored over there. That's crazy because the older generation is really, in some instances, trying to force everybody to come back to the office. So I see a real generational butt heading coming down. But
butt heading?
Yeah, I couldn't think of the technical word. I ran out of big words, Anthony. Use them all up for the year
I think the word you're looking for is headbutting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Stop. Reverse that.
But I find that is a crazy number, over 60%. But going back to hostels, when you're traveling with hostels, do you feel safe? Or sometimes you're like, well, that's a little sketchy, or I got to check out because I'm not feeling safe?
The only time I've prematurely checked out of a hostel is because 2 of my bunkmates woke up with ticks. Not bed bugs, ticks. Though, to be fair, they were camping in the mountains of Austria and slept in their sleeping bags in the bunk beds, which is a huge no. Many hostels say they specifically list in their rules, you cannot sleep in a sleeping bag on our bed. And I found out the hard way that is why. That's a big reason why.
Wait, hold on. Did it really tick you off?
It really ticked.
Sorry.
So let me ask you a question. First, Glenn, why do you keep telling bad jokes? And second, Lisa,
because I'm a dad. It's part of my job.
So I'm not a hostile guy.
I would argue you're very hostile, Anthony. Talk about some of your ex-employees.
Another bad joke. I've done a couple of hostels.
I'm doubling down.
I've done a couple of hostels on my TV shows, but I've never really stayed in one. And I have a problem. It's kind of like Uber, right? Everybody gets an Uber with a stranger. Same thing for taxis. So people kind of, get desensitized. But when you're going into a hostel, and whether you're a young woman or young man, you're laying down and going to sleep, separate bunks, separate beds, in the same room, using the same bathroom with complete strangers.
Yeah.
And somehow that doesn't scare most of that generation. That to me is kind of my concern.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me.
It's simple.
That doesn't bother me, but I know many of my friends from the US that would bother them.
Yeah, fair enough.
So there's, I found that there's not as much as a traveling difference between Gen Z and younger millennials. What the difference is solo travelers versus those who travel with friends or family.
Right.
So my parents and many of my friends from home, I have much less in common in the travel aspect than some random 18-year-old traveling by themselves from Israel or some other part of the world where our cultures are different. I have much more similar travel patterns as them, just because we both have that solo travel mindset where we are willing to compromise comfort and maybe cleanliness for price and social experience. And like I said, the people I spoke to in the hostels would much rather prefer to spend more on a hostel than a hotel because of the social aspect that comes with it.
How many countries have you been to?
31, and 21 I've traveled by myself.
Wow.
Right.
That is amazing.
Do you follow that guy, Drew Pinsky? He's been to 194 countries or something.
Oh, I know Drew Pinsky.
Oh, the guy on TikTok?
I knew him 20 something.
No,
ago.
he's a young kid. He's a young guy.
Oh, there's another guy.
I want you to, Lisa, I want you to, his name's Drew. Just put Drew the travel guy. He is fascinating. And if you're a solo traveler, you would love. He's like a research guru, and he's been in North Korea. He's been everywhere. Wow. And he just did a special he dropped on YouTube, a 42-minute special about Crown Heights in the Hasidic community, which is the most closed-off community in our country, apparently. It was fascinating. So I think you'd find him interesting.
Yeah, I think I would. I definitely, I'm actually not on TikTok.
Instagram, YouTube.
But yeah, no, I would find him interesting. And I do think that solo travel mindset, my parents used to joke to their friends, Lisa is someone who would go to Afghanistan tomorrow if someone invited her. I'm also that person who would want to travel, but me, as well as the younger Gen Z, are trying to, travel to places for longer and really adapt that kind of cultural understanding than the quantity of places that they're going to.
So your parents, I'm just going to guess, were not helicopter parents, and they let you discover things on your own.
Or
yes.
they repressed her so much she just had to get away. It could go either way in these.
Yeah, I was like, how far away can I possibly move? I did at one point move to Shanghai, actually China, and my mom did come and visit me, and the rest of my family got Chinese tourist visas just in case they wanted to visit me. So I have joked that, yes, how far away can I possibly move to get away from them? Yeah. That's absolutely not true. I'm very close with them. But
that's wonderful.
They know that I really want to do that, and they know that that's just my lifestyle. And so while sometimes they give me some backlash on that, like, why are you doing this to us? They realize that that's what makes me the happiest, and they know that I'm not trying to escape their, ruling.
That's cool. I like that. I tried to escape, but what are you gonna do? I love my parents. They were the best. But Lisa, I would like to spend a couple of minutes trying to break down the differences between generational differences versus being young, because some of the stuff that we're talking about, I was much more apt to behave that way when I was younger versus now. being a solo traveler for one, piling 20 people into a hotel room or a hostel for another, not caring about, a lot of creature comforts and all of that kind of stuff. So are you able to make any observations, what you think some people are going to grow out of versus what you think is just solid to the core generational aspects?
Yes, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is where the generations are traveling to. Solo backpacking through Europe, the baby boomers kind of started that.
But we tried to do that and we didn't. But we would go to Disney World, me and my 4 friends. But my kids, like you're saying, will go somewhere crazy in Europe or Africa or something.
Yes. So for sure, when the boomer generation would say, or Gen X, I'm backpacking through Europe, it was Spain, France, Italy, the Western, the Western European countries.
Yeah.
When you think of
classic
a typical
NATO
Europe
countries. Yeah.
Classic. Yes. And with the millennials, they kind of branched out to East Asia. And I found that personally, yes, I did a semester in Japan, China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. And I loved that. I'm a millennial. I loved venturing to East Asia. And Gen Z is preferring a hostel world, did a study in 2019, so pre-COVID, that they're really exploring Central and South America, as well as Iceland or Norway, the other maybe Scandinavian countries that are freezing cold, but beautiful, where, a bit older generations, when they go on vacation, they want to go to a beach, maybe, for example.
Yeah. Well, as a person that travels to those places you just said, all those places, Norway and that part of the world is my favorite part of the world. What do you see in Generation Z when you break it down by countries or continents? Like a person, a Gen Z here in America, how different are they from a Gen Z in Europe?
Good question.
Good question. I would say that what I found is Gen Z or younger people from the US and UK kind of travel similarly in that maybe political escapism kind of thing. They want to get away from their own country and kind of go as far as possible. They want to go and experience cultures that are very different from their own. When the European Gen Z that I met, the majority of those I talked to were Europeans, just because I was in Europe. I was in Serbia, Montenegro, the Eastern European, Balkan countries that, normally you don't think of when you think of a European vacation.
Right.
And it was easier for them to travel domestically, I guess, within, by trains, buses, where Americans here or those from the UK can't really travel that way. We need a flight, we need to dedicate maybe 20 hours to get places. So it is, I do believe that most Americans that I did speak to would love to go to Central South America. It's a little bit easier to get there. There's not really a time zone difference. And so when they are working remotely, that's a lot of places that they will choose is Colombia, Costa Rica, Venezuela, Chile, because they can work their 9 to 5 and be in the time zone. Whereas those I met in Spain, who were Americans working abroad, it was a little rough. There's a big time difference.
How about the Gen Z and the younger generation in Asia? How are they similar or they're completely different?
I guess it's got to be very different with Chinese youth for South Korea and stuff like that, right?
Well, that's what I'm asking, Glenn, but thank you for clarifying. Thank God for you, Glenn.
I personally, on my, so I don't know if the pandemic has a lot to do with this. I personally did not meet anyone this summer in Europe who were from East Asia. I believe I met one man who was from South Korea, but he was actually currently living in New York. So even though he was, a South Korean native, he traveled maybe a little bit differently because
But
he
you
was from
spent
the
time
US.
you said you spent time in Asia. So when you spent time there,
Yes.
how's the difference?
So I spent time there between 2016 and 2018. So I guess most of the people I did meet in Shanghai who were foreigners to China were
Right.
from the US or the UK actually, and they, we had a lot in common between 2016 and 2018 of why we kind of were frustrated with our own home countries, which I then saw similarly this summer in Europe. And I would say that right now the travel trend, now that China has reopened, that their locals can now leave the country post-pandemic, that the main majority of those traveling are the baby boomer generation.
Yes.
I saw this I'm from Chicago. I saw this in Chicago. I saw this in Germany of big tour groups of Chinese, in big tour groups, and they were all the baby boomer generation just because they didn't get to travel abroad when they were younger because of the border control travel regulations. But now that they can, venture abroad due to government laws, they are traveling in big groups, which is not seen by a lot of the other maybe westernized cultures. Is, not necessarily, if my parents or their friends are traveling, they're not going in a group of 30 other Americans. They might travel with a travel agent or a tour guide as a small family and friend kind of travel rather than a big group. I'm not necessarily sure about other countries from East Asia.
I think, Lisa, some of that has to do with the amount of travel people from those different locations have been to. I'm speaking a little bit anecdotally here, of course, but I do believe if you look at U.S. travel and they talk about Chinese travelers, a lot of times they'll come over in that big group the first time, for example. But then after that, once they get that confidence and they've done that group trip, then they'll start to go in more individualized types of trips. So I'm wondering if that'll happen a little bit in the future. But the other concern I have, not a generational thing, but about the Chinese traveler, is that I think they're about to get socked by a recession. And since most of them, the only way to really save in China is investing in real estate, I think it's going to be a big issue for them. But that's neither here nor there. That's for another time.
So let me ask a completely irrelevant question to stay on brand. When you write your book, Lisa, and you're sitting and you're saying, who is the most interesting person outside of me and Glenn that you've met traveling? I wanted to know who it was and why.
I would say
good question. I love this.
most female travelers I met from Germany.
Why?
So what's really interesting to me as an American, in an American work culture, is that in Germany, a lot of times the corporate workers are forced to take vacation time. They get much more vacation time, and they're encouraged to do so. I would say the most interesting individual that I met, her name was Teresa. She was 30, and I met her in Spain. She was a PhD cancer researcher in a lab, and she worked hard and hard because she loved it, not because she was forced. And she told me that her company was kind of like, you need to take a vacation, like be gone for a month, just do your thing. And she was like, I'm going to travel around Spain and Portugal because my job is kind of forcing me to take this time to take a break, relax my brain a little bit so I can come back refreshed. And to me, where work culture is not necessarily like that, that was really interesting that her, their culture was that you kind of need to take a break rather than competing to who can work the hardest, who can work the longest, which I find here in this country is people brag about, oh, well, I worked 12 hours today. Why are you tired?
Yeah, but I think that that's changed dramatically. I mean, matter of fact, you're shunned and shamed for working 12 hours and to work 6 days a week. People look at you like you have three heads.
Yeah, I was a teacher for 4 years, and I spent most of my time outside of the classroom grading, planning, especially because a lot of times I was in situations where I needed to create curriculum from scratch. And yeah, for sure, no one was jealous of me. No one was like, wow, I wish I could work, put in 12 hours a day for my job. For me, it created a lot of burnout. And I know that's happening in that industry, which is a whole other topic. But I wasn't necessarily shamed for it. I was more like pitied.
Right.
Pitied
Yeah. Like,
for it,
why are you doing that? Right.
Yeah. Why would you do that to yourself? Where, the baby boomer generation, maybe older Gen X, were kind of like, that's, what you should be doing. If you want to, make it to the top, you have to, put in 12-hour days. Where now, people are like, why would you do that to yourself? Of course you're going to quit that. Of course you're going to quit that career. Why? Like, you don't have free time. You don't have any work-life balance. So yeah, like, I wouldn't say I was shunned. I would just say that people were confused and concerned for me and what that was doing to my personal life and mental health.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Right. Well, the reason you stayed for 4 years is because you were making all that money, right?
Yeah, I said, I'm gonna save all this money, all this extra money that I'm not spending on rent and food and trying to live. I'm, gonna save it and easily buy a house.
Take that, Elon Musk. Yeah.
Now, when you travel, do you work like locally? Like, could you pick up a job locally at one of these countries for extra cash?
I have not, and I do think a lot of European countries, at least, have a hard time wanting to sponsor Americans, specifically because of visa laws. When I lived in China, I did have a job there, but that's why I was there. It was a contract job for an X amount of time, where a lot of countries don't really want to sponsor you.
Right.
How was your boss? How was your boss in China?
Good. I don't know. Good. One of my bosses was from the northern part of China, closer to Russia. And my other boss was from, Plainfield, Illinois, which is about a 40-minute drive from where I lived. I didn't feel like the
Plainfield, Illinois is not China?
Close.
In the Hunan province. Yeah.
Close. Yeah. In the mountains there. No. So I would say, I just think that I was teaching there, and I would say my teaching experience there was much better, more relaxing than my experience in the United States.
How so?
Parents.
What? Really?
Parents suck these days.
I would think that parents.
We will do nothing and expect everything from you, teacher.
No,
That's
but
what's going on here.
Then why does the Asian parent in this country have this stigma that they're on top of their kid, and American parents don't care? Like, isn't that a thing? So I find that fascinating.
Sure, I would say in China, the parents respected teachers more. They said, if my child is not performing well or they have behavior something, it's my child's fault and my personal responsibility to correct that behavior. Where in the US was a little bit more entitled, where one time I got accused of, forcing a child to hit another child at recess. What did you do to make, my son do that? That was absolutely an insane accusation, because I double dog dared him to hit her. I don't know why that was kind of my fault, or my kid is misbehaving in your class because he's bored. Or where in China, if there was a behavior issue, the next day I got a note written, a handwritten apology from the kid. I felt more respected and more I have an undergrad degree, I have a license and 2 endorsements to do this. So I'm, seen as more qualified, where here it wasn't like that.
Well, to be fair,
that makes sense. So they're just as interested, if not more interested in the education. They just depend on the teacher to be responsible and teach and respect them. My wife's a teacher for 30 years, and so and she works during the pandemic when they were working from home. And people say, well, kids didn't get a really good, didn't really learn anything. She teaches pre-K, and I know they're not really learning, algebra, but that class by the end of the year were like so close, even though they did it in Zoom. And when they finally met in the schoolyard at the end of the year, they were all just hugging and kissing. Yeah. And so but it was just hours and hours of effort on my wife's part to make sure that happened.
Yeah, I bet. Kids on Zoom, I'm sure we're not, especially the young ones. I'm sure we're really antsy.
Yeah,
I can't imagine.
Well, they did it in like, they broke it up into like 4 or 5 times during the day. So it's like 45 minutes of rest, 45. So they did it where it made sense.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, I've got to wrap this show up because I know we've got to get going. But before we do that, I did want to say Germany has 20 days forced paid vacation per year, according to Wikipedia. And here in the United States, 0 days of mandatory vacation. I think that says it all. Lisa, give us a good way to sum all of this up on how to better connect with Generation Z.
Sure. I would say, Generation Z is trying to explore places that aren't full of tourists. A few of them, questioned why I was going to Dubrovnik, Croatia, because that's a huge tourist area. They filmed Game of Thrones there, so anything to do there is too touristy. Another thing is they really kind of shun people who are traveling to Venice, for example, because of how the nature and
the
local culture is being affected by over tourism. So I would say, more off the beaten path places, Eastern Europe, South and Central America is where Generation Z is most interested in going to. And the actual prime majority population who is solo traveling is American and German women. Now that women have, dominated the solo travel market, they're obviously looking for places that are safe. But I would say that they're more confident in their ability to keep themselves safe, and therefore they are okay with traveling to somewhere that's not as touristly developed. So yeah, that's
cool. Well, thank you, Lisa. If someone wants to reach out to you, how can they find you?
I'm not huge on social media, but I have just created a solo travel account on Instagram.
You have an Instagram, right? Yeah.
So I would say Solo Travel with Lisa is my brand new Instagram account where I will be giving some solo travel tips, primarily for anyone who wants to travel solo, but primarily women.
Awesome.
So let me ask you a question. You've done all this traveling and you don't put it on social media and show people to follow you and like get people, like you don't do that?
No, my Instagram is on private, my personal, and if anyone tries to follow me who I don't know, I will block them.
Wow. I like that attitude.
So no, I would say sometimes for my local or my personal friends, I'm like, here's what I'm doing, but a maximum of 1 to 2 stories on Instagram a day.
Yep.
That's fascinating to me.
Cool.
Yeah, that's just me personally.
No, and believe me, I get it. That's me. I don't like doing it either, but just someone of your advanced age, I think, someone of as young as you, I would think that you would do it. But anyway, so if you stay in the green room, I want to see if you will find Drew, because I think you would find his stuff interesting, because he does a lot of the stuff that you probably do pre-trip. Like he really helps. I really found it fascinating.
Yeah,
Lisa,
thank you.
Great. So stay by. Take care. We'll see you in a bit. And want to thank all of you guys for being here today. What a fascinating conversation. Be sure to listen to it again in audio form on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, SoundCloud. But don't just do it for me. Do it for all of those great jokes that I do here every single day. I did that one just for you. All right, everybody. Remember, you've got one life, so blaze on and
Be kind to yourself.
see y'all later. Back tomorrow.